Hi, welcome back. In this code along exercise, we're going to update the market report table by requesting new properties via an AJAX request. So to start off with, I'm going to open up Terminal and we'll go ahead and check our status and we'll check the branches. Okay, so I think I'll go ahead and create a new feature branch and we'll go ahead and call this one AJAX market table. And then we'll go ahead and bring this up in Sublime Text. And I'm going to double click and bring up the market report page here. And we'll bring this HTML up in the browser by selecting Open in Browser. So you can see that when we left off last time, we had created this table full of properties. And if we come back to Sublime Text and we open up the JavaScript file table.js, you can see that the way we are accomplishing that is we had created a property class and we're instantiating new instances of that property here by creating property variables. Now this is very manual in the sense that anytime we want to list a new property, then we would have to come into the JavaScript file and actually create a new variable, property 5, property 6, etc. So to streamline this and make this a little more convenient for our client, we're going to be making an AJAX request to pull JSON about each new property from an application. So I've already actually created the application. Let's go ahead and jump over and look at that in the browser. So you can see if we go to exceptional-realty-property-add.herokuapp.com, it actually takes us to a table here where we have a listing of properties. Now this would be an administrative screen that people who worked for the real estate company would see. So they could log in to this particular website, and in order to add new properties or edit them, they would have to have a password. So for example, if I want to change the date here of 455 Crazy Lane from April 1st to April 2nd, I can go ahead and click Edit, and then here I'll change this to April 2nd and click Update. Okay. And here I can see the full list of properties. So this is a simple application that was built using Ruby on Rails, and I'm hosting it for free on Heroku. Now since this is a Rails app, I can add .json on the end of the properties route here in the URL, and that's going to give me back this JSON string. So what we'll do is we'll use a jQuery AJAX GET request to get this JSON string. And then we'll use this string then to create new objects inside of our JavaScript. Now the nice thing about this is that whenever one of the employees logs into this admin interface, they're going to be able to add, remove, delete, and update these properties. And every time a user visits the website, since it's using an AJAX request to pull down the newest JSON string that represents these property listings, then they're always going to get the benefit of seeing the most up-to-date information, and the employees at Exceptional Realty will have a nice user interface that they can use to add and remove properties without having to code on the website directly. So let's go ahead and jump back over to the JavaScript and get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to comment out all of these variables here where we're creating new property instances. What we'd like to do instead is change this comment to say get properties via an API, in this case the one that we've created here, and create the properties based on that. Okay, now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the $.get method here to make use of jQuery's get AJAX request method. Now the first argument here is the URL that we'd like to make this request from. So I'm going to go ahead and copy in the URL I have here in the browser. So here I'm going to go ahead and copy this URL here, which is the exceptional-realty-property-add.herokuapp.com/properties.json. So if I come back here in the table.js file, I can just paste in that URL. Okay, so this is the full URL here that we will be requesting the JSON from. And then comma, the second argument here is the success function that will run whenever we get a successful response back. And here for the argument of this function, we're going to pass in the response that we're getting back. In other words, the JSON string that we'll be getting here from this URL. So just to see if this is working, we'll do a console.log and we will type in response here. And let's go ahead and save. And then we will come back to the browser here and we'll bring up our JavaScript console. And let's go ahead and do a refresh. Okay, excellent. So since I commented out the objects, we are no longer seeing them as rows in the table. But the good news is that down here in the console, our console log is in fact retrieving the array of those 4 different property objects. So you can see here each individual property, 2345 Fairview Lane, 974 Clapton Street, etc. So the next thing we'd like to do is we would like to loop over each individual object that's in this array here that we've been given back. And we would like to create a new property for each element in the array. So I'm going to go ahead and use jQuery's $.each method. And for the first argument here, we're going to say response, which is referring to the response we got back here, which is the array full of objects. And then the second argument here is the function that will run for each of those elements. And here we get the parameters available to us of the index number and also the value of the element, which in this case the value of the element is each individual object. And these are particularly properties, so I'm just going to name this argument property. So next, same as before, we want to actually create a new instance of a property. So I'm just going to go ahead and say var property equals a new property based off of the property class here with the capital P, which you can see up here at the top. Okay. And the information we want to pass in here is all of the things we're expecting, such as the street, the city, the state, the price, and the posted date. Okay. So you can see that if we come back into the browser here, that I've actually labeled these the same inside of my Rails app. So we have city, state, street, and the posted date here. Okay, so let's go ahead and refer to each of those one by one. So the first thing we want to pass in is the street. So we'll say property dot street, and then we'll say property dot city, comma property dot state, comma property dot price, and comma property dot posted, which will be the posted date there. So to see if this is working, let's go ahead and add another console log and check out if we're getting all of those properties back. So I'm just going to copy this from the commented out one down there. So we'll say console.log property.all. So this is going to report back the array that's storing all of the properties. Okay, so let's go ahead and save this and come back to the browser and refresh. Okay, and here we can see the response we got back via AJAX again was this array full of objects. And now we can see that we've actually created some properties based on the property class here. So now they're all listed as property instead of just object. So that seems to be working. Now the only thing left to do is to do the property.display content here. And then we can go ahead and comment out the console logs. And remember, the property.display content is a static method we added to the property class here, and this will go through and it will update the actual DOM content. So we'll go ahead and save this, and then if we come back to the browser and refresh, you can see those properties are appearing now. Now one thing that would be kind of nice is if we could have this refresh itself automatically, or possibly give the user a button that they could click to refresh this page without having to load, the whole browser window, but just load this listing of properties here. That way they could, check and see if there's any updated properties. Maybe you might want to leave this screen open on your desktop, and every once in a while you'll just check it and see if there's any new properties, right? Because as everyone knows, the early bird gets the worm, right? So let's go ahead and add a refresh button here in the corner. So I'm going to go back to the market-report.html, and we will come down to the bottom of the table here. And just before this span that has a class of new here, where it's saying, how many days old that the starred properties are, let's go before that span and let's create a button. Okay. And this particular button, we're going to write refresh listings on the button, and we'll give this button an ID, and we'll give it an ID of refresh, and we'll also give it a class of right so that it will float to the right. Okay. So we'll save that, and if we come back here and refresh, we now have a button here, although it doesn't have any functionality yet. Okay, so I would like to set up an event listener on this button. So I'm going to come back over here to the table.js file, and what I'll do is I will nest this AJAX GET request here inside of a function. So we'll just indent that, and we'll create a new function here called refresh. Okay. And we'll close it down here, the bottom of the function, and we can actually delete these variables that are commented out here since we're not using them any longer. Okay, and we can also get rid of the display content here, like that. Okay, so if we want this refresh function to run as soon as the page loads, we could just type in refresh to call that function here. Okay, and this will, this will call the function when the page loads. Okay, we'll test this just to make sure this is still working now that we've inserted it in a function, and it appears to still be loading. Okay. So next we want to add a event listener on that refresh button. So we can say $refresh to select the button here that has the ID of refresh. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and say .click, and when we click, we're going to call the refresh function here. So here we are referring to this refresh function, and we're essentially kind of copying and pasting the value of this refresh right here. So it's going to run this function whenever we click the refresh button. And just to give us a clue that this is working, maybe I'll uncomment this console log again here, and we should be able to see the response coming back each time I click refresh. So let's go ahead and click the refresh listings button now, and you can see that each time I click the refresh listings button, we're actually creating more objects into that properties array, and they're getting appended double times here is the only bad thing. So every time I click it, my list is just going to get longer and longer. And it's actually working in the sense that it's making the AJAX GET request again. But the way I have this code written here, each time it gets the GET request, it's going to build new properties, right? And those properties are going to get appended onto the array of property.all. And then I'm going to use display content to loop over all those properties here and append them essentially into the table. So instead of doing that, what I want to do is I want to make sure that I clear out that array each time. So we can say property.all to physically clear the array of property instances. So additionally, what I want to do is clear out the DOM. So I'm going to have jQuery select the table and I'm going to call .find to find the T body. And then I'm going to call .empty, which is a method that's going to empty out the contents of the table body, essentially emptying out the rows. So here we'll say empty table body. So I'll go ahead and save this, and then we can come back to the browser and we'll refresh with the new code. And now this time, whenever I click the refresh listings button, even though I am refreshing the information or the content here from the API, in other words, I'm refreshing the JSON that I'm getting back and rebuilding this list of properties, which you can see here, I'm actually updating the information as I go, but it's not giving me duplicates now. So to make sure this is working, let's go ahead and pretend that we are one of the employees of the Exceptional Realty Group company. And let's say that we have logged in to the administrative web application here, and we've decided to create a new property. And then what we can do is see if our customer who's actually viewing the website will be able to see that new listing when they click refresh. So I've already logged in here and I put in my username and password to log in. So I can say new property, and I will make up a street name, 123 Duckville Avenue, and we'll say this is in Queens, New York, and we'll set the price at $679,865, and we'll say that this guy was posted on 2014 April, see whatever today is. Today's the 10th when I'm recording this here. So we'll say 2014 April 10th. Okay, it says property was successfully created. And if I go back to my list of properties, I can see there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties now. So let's switch roles, and let's say that we're now the user who's shopping for real estate, and we visited the website, and we want to click refresh to see if there's any new listings since we first started looking at the list here. So if I click refresh list, bam, you can see 123 Duckville Avenue just popped up on the screen. Now, if you wanted to set it up so this was automated and the user didn't have to click the refresh listing button, what you could do is you could come here into the table script, and we could use the JavaScript set interval method. And the set interval method will allow you to call a function. For example, we could call refresh, and as a second argument, it lets you specify the number of seconds between each time it will call that function. So if I say 5,000 here, then every 5, this is actually set in milliseconds, so every 5 seconds it's going to call the refresh function. Okay, so here if I go ahead and save this page, and then if we come back to the browser here and refresh, you'll see that every 5 seconds we're going to get the information will be updated here automatically. So there's another one. There's another one. There's another one. Okay. So just like clockwork, we're actually refreshing it. So to demonstrate that this is updating automatically, let's change one of these addresses. We'll say that there was a correction after we posted this. So here it says 123 Duckville Avenue. So let's go back over here and we'll go to Duckville and we'll click edit. And I'm going to set this to 356 Duckville Avenue. And then when I click update, I'm going to quickly jump back to what the visitor of our website is seeing and see if it updates that street address. So in theory, it should update every 5 seconds. All right, so we'll go update, we'll come back, and bam, it just updated from 123 to 356. Cool. So again, same thing, we want to create a new listing or we want to delete a listing, etc. So here I'll go ahead and delete 455 Crazy Lane. Okay, so we'll come back here and we'll go to 455 Crazy Lane, and I'm going to click destroy. Okay, and then if I come back over here the next time that it refreshes via the AJAX request, it removes that property. So this will always be real time and updated to our database here on the backend server side. Okay, so you can see AJAX gives us a lot of flexibility, and the browser page itself didn't have to reload. It's just behind the scenes making AJAX requests, and we're using that JSON information to create new JavaScript objects and update the DOM. I'm going to go back into my script, and I think I'll remove some of these console logs here. All right, and we'll go ahead and save this page, and I'm going to go back to terminal now, and we'll go ahead and do a git status, and we can see that we've updated these two files here. So we'll do a git add dot, and we'll do a git commit -m. And here you can see I'm just using the shorthand for commit. I have an alias created so I don't have to type out the whole word there. If you don't have the alias, you can type COMMIT, of course, the full word git commit. And here we'll just say, let's see, so add AJAX market table. Okay, and we'll do git push -u origin AJAX market table to push up this new branch. That way you guys can see that code independently of the other branches. And because this is a publishable change and we're happy with it, we can go ahead and merge it into master. So git checkout master, git merge AJAX market table branch, and we can push this guy up to origin also. So we'll say git push origin master.